this is a special meeting, so we're, it's gonna be handled a little bit differently with us, in a joint session here with the council. So we're gonna go ahead and start by doing the pledge, and then, we'll sign it, we'll walk both people in as being here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so as far as the commissioners, we have a full load here with Greg and Randy and myself here, so I'll turn it over to Lindy and she can start on her side with the council.
And the council, we have everybody present. Diane Mullins.
Okay.
Call the order.
All right, well, this meeting actually is strictly an informational meeting. We have Jason here with Baker and Tilly, and he's going to be giving us a presentation on where we're at and giving some also additional information about ARPA money and also the opioid settlement. Hopefully some information saying exactly how and what we can do. So
I think more just the idea was for incoming and existing councilmen and commissioners to be able to ask Paige and Jason questions if they had them, so they can know kind of where you're at, and then they can also kind of update you on the things that they find pretty important from their side. And then I think we also have some department heads here and some other people who may have some questions, just generally, or just want to hear to receive some information.
okay.
And I myself want to learn some stuff, so, all right.
So Jason, who you have with you?
Yeah, this is Paige Samsung. So she's a fellow partner with Baker Tilly, and also before we merged with Baker Tilly with Umball as well. So I've been with the firm for almost 23 years, worked with Scott County for those 23 years. So I feel like I kind of grown up with some of the elected officials here over the time, and see some familiar faces, but also see a lot of new faces. So I think in talking to Zach, we just kind of wanted to come down here this evening and kind of introduce ourselves. We've served as municipal advisor for the county. Like I said, I've worked for the county myself for over 20 years. And what that means is through, bond issues that the county has done. We've done what we call kind of comprehensive financial plans, which I know we've presented them. We've done them about every 2 years. That just kind of looks at kind of a long-term plan of the county, kind of looks at various funds. I have a copy of, I know we sent one out last year, but I brought one with me. The county has a TIF area, the Austin Trout TIF area. We help the auditor's office with that. There's 2 bond issues that the county has, which will have a payment due probably January 15th. There's 2 bonds, so that's something that you'll want to make sure that we make those payments on time. But just kind of really want to introduce ourselves. We're here as a resource. We've helped the county with the ARPA funds. You mentioned the ARPA funds. I've been down here a couple of times in the last 12 to 18 months, just kind of in general about the ARPA funds. I know there were still some discussions about what projects might be want to fund. So that's something that we've also given some guidance on. Paige, her expertise is with the budget. She helps a lot of communities with the approval of their budget process and with DLGS. That's why we haven't been as involved with the county in the past in the budget process, but wanted you to introduce Paige to you in case that's something that you think you might need more going in the future. But yeah, we're really just in kind of a resource for the county for overseas, kind of all financial. And I know there's been talk about potential funding a capital project in the future, so that was something that Zach mentioned that you might have some questions on what are the different process and avenues that you can look at. So happy to answer those questions if you have any at this point.
Well, the one thing that I would like to, I guess, to the ARPA money, and and I think there's only a couple of small projects that we've actually, used or utilized some of that money for, the roof here in a bridge that we're talking about building this year. Has anything changed with, how to, like spending in certain areas, or is it still the same that it's been in the past? I mean, is there anything changed where the federal government said, yes, we're opening up to more areas, or we're restricting more areas?
I'll put something here as well, but I think the last time I came down here was when, some good news came out where we had, they actually reduced the restrictions, where we had that you could, qualify up to $10 million as revenue loss.
Yeah.
Which gave the county much more flexibility. So that was really the last big change, which I think you guys chose to do that.
We did do that.
Yeah,
But we can still, I guess with that, we can still modify that, can't we?
yes.
So,
Yeah, you can, utilize that for any operational purpose, so whatever the county would normally spend money on, you can use it for that. If it's outside of the scope of normal county business, then we may need to take a closer look at whether it would fit within the guidelines or not. But yeah, I mean, if you have designated it as revenue replacement or revenue loss, that's really as far as you have to go. You don't have to really specify in detail underneath that unless you want to.
okay, so it capitalizes, actually, most of what we do is a county government.
Yeah, right,
Okay,
just
so-
I
governmental
think one of
services, yeah.
the limitations that was placed on it though is you cannot use it to offset or pay down debt.
That's true.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
And the other thing is that, we also have, just for everyone, independent counsel at Prosper and Todd, if there was a specific project where there was a question, but, I had a specific question about whether or not, I think it's the Davis-Bacon Act, would have any effect relative to the use of the funds. And ultimately, we don't think that that's the case, but, we're all trying to learn as we go about, and that, again, that deals with like public purchasing requirements and stuff at a federal level, if you're receiving federal grant money, so.
Well,
One of
again,
that has to do whether before, that was a concern, before we could apply the all towards revenue replacement. So you had to be very careful on what projects you chose and how you funded them.
because we don't want to pay it back.
Right.
Well, I need to qualify, for our question again, that the debt repayment. We can take money we already have, pay on debt, replace with this money.
I think what you're getting at is like, let's say you had, something in your general fund that you wanted to, that you typically pay out of your general fund. You can now pay for that expense out of your ARP fund, which would free up money in your general fund that could be available for debt. You could do that. So you can kind of get to the same place.
That's kind of backwards what I was thinking. I mean, we pay the debt with money we have.
As long as it's not, ARPA
Same thing, what you
funds,
said,
so
like
yeah,
backwards.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me clarify that. So, in there, correct me if I'm not saying what you're saying, but, so you're saying that if we have debt, and of course we do, that you can take money out of the general fund or rainy day fund or whatever and pay that debt off or down or whatever. I guess where I'm questioning is, can you take the ARPA money then and put it in general fund and say,
So
you have general?
can't replace that money.
So here's how you do this, is that you could take appropriation line items in your general fund and pay them instead out of ARPA. You have to keep the money in ARPA, out of the ARPA fund, and pay it out of there. So let's say you have $2 million of appropriations, you can pick a large line item, health insurance, I don't know, I don't know how much that runs. But take-
Don't bring that up today.
Take the health insurance line item, pay for it out of ARPA instead, now you've just freed up $2 million in the general fund, that could be used for debt, or whatever it is you wanna use it for.
So is that what you're saying, Eric?
That would work, but that's not what I was saying. I mean, it's the
Well,
same thing.
say what you, because I want to clarify what you're, because I'm trying to.
You'll have to explain that to me one more time.
I think
Act like you're talking to a rock.
I think-
Run that by me one more time. I try to,
Just tell her what you're asking, I
Well,
mean,
what I was asking was, we can just take the money that we have, pay off debt, and replace it with ARPA money. And
Back into the
that's-
fund that it came from, is what
No,
he's trying
you
to.
cannot
that is a
transfer
no.
ARPA money
Right.
to any
Okay, so
other
what's the
fund.
procedure that we could
Right, so you cannot transfer ARPA monies to any other fund, it has to say segregated in that fund. So what you do is you make your expenditures out of the ARPA fund. So in the general fund, you've got all these different line items. Take those expenditure line items and pay for them out of ARPA instead. Now you've just freed up money in the general fund that can be used for these other activities.
I got it, that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So anybody else got any questions?
Is the timeline still the same? We have to have it allocated by 2024 and spent by 26?
Yes, so you have to have it, yes, at least obligated by the end of 2024, and then you have until the end of 2026.
Anybody else got any questions about the
In terms of like current obligation, I think despite the fact that we maybe have not, spent a large amount at this point in consideration of the hole that was designated to Scott County, we have obligated at least, I think, somewhere close to $2 million, maybe in a little excess of that. So we're about halfway through the 4.6 that was.
Well, from the way I understood in the past was that we allocated more than what the project actually has paid, or actually cost, I guess, at the end of the project. So we actually asked for more money, or the council gave us more money than what the project actually, so that would actually reduce or increase that, what we still do have left.
And I think you're talking about when we advertise the appropriations specifically
That's correct.
for the bridge project, we did advertise the appropriation on the high side. And actually, I think
The roof did too.
the roof as well, and the numbers actually came back in
That's
lower on both of those projects, so yes.
So at the end of the, well,
And that would just go,
from what I understand, at the end of this calendar year, those what was allocated actually and advertised, I guess, would, and whatever the difference would be, would go back to the fund because it was not spent, so.
like
And-
you said, gotta stay separate, always going back to that fund. If it's not spent, at the end of 2026, it's not ours anymore.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone in this room is not gonna send it back, so.
I know at one time we talked about, I know that the region received, some ready funds, and there was talk about doing a joint project with the city and both cities. Is
It's
that still
coming.
on the table, or?
Well, from what I understand, a county south of us, or actually 2 counties south of us, received a bunch of that money, so we didn't get what we thought we were gonna get, but I'm being told that there's another allocation of money coming. So we were told to send our project again, and any additional projects, because there's gonna be some more money coming, so, but that,
The ready to
Yeah.
talk about?
yeah, and I'm sure you know about that, so. Well, again, I'm gonna stay on the ARPA, and anybody here sitting at this table, if they got questions or something, be more than happy to jump up and say something. With the, how the federal government set up the ARPA funds, as far as who decides and who allocates, I mean, is that still the same, or is it, something's changed in that states that, the commissioners are, fund the project, and then the council appropriates the money? That's still the same way it's always been?
Yeah, I can address that. So there is no place that says that commissioners and council, either one, have full authority over this money. What the State Board of Accounts has suggested is that you work together to determine what you want to use the money for, and then you're right, the council is the one that would approve the appropriation of the monies. But really, it should be a collaborative efforts. Determine what you want to spend.
So has that changed from the beginning? Because at the beginning, we were told to create a ordinance, I think it was, to state that this is how that project's gonna run, so.
No, it's kind of the same. I think at the beginning, there was some belief that the commissioners had control over the ARPA money, and that really was not the case. State Board of Accounts has said a number of times that it should be a collaborative effort. Yes, you're right, at the beginning, you should have created an ordinance to set up the fund and then just kind of spell out what your plan is. And again, collaborative effort, I've seen many of those ordinances signed by both the commissioners and the council.
Okay, well, tell me this then, and I mean, and I know they're sitting right here, it's like, you know, but, what happens if you can't agree?
That's difficult.
So, you know, the commissioners agree on a project, it goes to council, and they just keep saying no.
Well, the council can say no to the appropriation.
So I
That's-
guess we'll
that's
send
the-
it back to Biden then, so.
Yeah. The council has the ultimate authority to approve that appropriation, so that's where you're gonna get caught, and I think that's why State Board of Accounts has said a number of times, please just cooperate and try to collaborate, but I hear what you're saying.
Good luck with that.
I hear exactly what you're saying.
Give the new people a chance.
Yeah, right.
Jeez.
I have one question. When we went to our new officer training,
Mhm.
they were telling us that 10% of that money had to be laid aside for the single audit. Is
Really?
that right?
I've not heard that at all.
No, that was,
Well, what is it?
I think that was for the COVID, for the COVID money.
Okay.
Not the COVID money, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Opioid,
The
the
opioid.
opioid
Oh.
money, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, what was the question about what'd they say?
They said we had to lay 10% of the fund aside for a single audit after the money was spent, to pay for the federal audit.
Well, you wouldn't get audited unless,
Government be auditing opioid
unless they think you misappropriated it.
I think they suggested putting some money aside in case.
Okay.
I think they suggested putting up to, depending on how much you received, but I don't think it's required.
So just how the opioid settlement money is obviously paid over, you know, a long period of time. There's been a lump sum payment, I think, made this year, approximately $450,000 in abatement funds, and like
16.
116 in
160.
Unrestricted funds for Scott County specifically. When you look into the future, and how those payments are made, this is a larger sum than we will ever receive, you know, in any of the future years. So I don't know if they were saying reserve 10% annually or recommending reserving 10% annually. I've not heard anything about that, but I just.
That's why I was asking. I don't wanna approve spending money and then find out we're on the hook for it.
And just general, I would say the same process occurs for the abatement funds, and even restricted funds that occurs for the ARPA money. If the executive approves kind of a general, you know, resolution on what you want to spend it on, or a specific, you know, then it goes to council to decide what specific projects they would appropriate.
Zach, do you oversee that? Like, I know 85% of it is the restricted funds, talking opioid settlement, and then the other, do you oversee like what meets the criteria for restricted or the unrestricted is
In terms of
obviously,
the
whatever, but-
use, so like what you're at, the service you're actually. I can definitely make the, kind of recommendations as to whether or not something would qualify as an abatement fund use versus an unrestricted use. But, actually, the Attorney General has put out a list, a schedule of kind of like per se approved purposes that they have. You can get it from the Attorney General's website, publicly available. I don't know, it makes it clear in the document that that's not all of the uses. For instance, the county might have a different idea of what they might want to use it for. We might want to ask, you know, whether or not that would be a qualified use, before using abatement money.
Right.
But in terms of do I oversee it, obviously, I'm not an elected official, I don't have a vote, I can give you my advice.
Fair enough.
Now, for the opioid settlements, are they suggesting making an ordinance so the same steps that they did with the ARPA money, or not?
I do not think that that procedure is, in terms of you mean the approval of like the generalized resolution with the categories?
Yeah.
I don't think that there's anything like that, cause it's already state law.
Okay,
You just need to make sure it is in a completely separate fund
Yeah.
and it's segregated.
so we need to create a line item.
Yes, and I saw State Board of Accounts did put out, a specific fund number that you're supposed to use for that opioid settlement money.
We'll change directions a little bit here. On the bond that we have for the jail, you know, I've asked in the past, but I guess I still haven't got the answer, because I'll have to ask our new auditor, but I was asking for how many years we had left and and also, how much, I guess, that bond was issued for. And I guess, Jason, I'm gonna ask you if we, and I'm not saying for everybody on TV, I'm not saying that we're doing any kind of capital project, but I'm asking a question that you could answer, I think, that if we were going to do a capital project, and I'm gonna throw a number out that it's $15 million, if we have an existing bond, can we extend that bond and add to that bond, or what's the best and proper way to do something like that?
Sure. On your jail bond, you have, let's see, $4,230,000 for principal outstanding. And that's really after you make your January payment here.
That's if we do?
After you make your January payment.
I'm sorry, 4 million what?
$4,230,000.
If you do.
If we do? Nice.
And that matures, February 2035.
2035, I'll be gone.
So if you remember, I actually, when we did the comprehensive financial plan, we talked about refinancing that because interest rates were kind of low, and we were gonna save a whole lot, maybe $25,000 a year, but we talked about potentially going forward and refinancing that, but then about that same time, that's when rates started creeping up, and it just didn't make sense to refinance it. So and rates have only increased, since we last talked last summer. So it probably wouldn't make sense to refinance this and do a new money. It'd make more sense just to do a separate bond issue for a separate capital.
But if the rates were down like they had been 2 years ago or 3
Then we'd
years
probably
ago.
look at maybe refinancing and doing a refinance and new money.
Okay. So, okay,
But
that,
your rates, I mean, they're, anywhere from 3 to 4%, so that's still pretty competitive rates. That'd be hard to beat right now.
so your suggestion is if the rates were low to do it, and if not, then just do a separate.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, cause it would cost you more money in the long run to refinance this.
Just the charges.
Just the charges, and probably the rates would be might be even higher than what you currently have.
Okay. All right.
What's the other bond?
The other bond is, payable from the tax increment, the Austin Tri-Hawk. Those are bonds that the company actually purchased. There's an incentive for them to do an expansion. So it's payable just from the tax increment that's collected from Austin Tri-Hawk.
You're talking about the tip fund.
Yeah.
How much do we have on there?
There is $689,000. And it matures, January 2029. And that's something, I can definitely work with you. The redevelopment commission has their own requirements, deadlines that they have to meet, certain reporting requirements on Gateway and annual, reports that we've helped the county and the redevelopment commission in the past.
Okay. I got anything else? 'Cause those are the main questions I had, cause I wanted to, I'm not saying again, for everybody that bashes me tomorrow, there is not a capital project out here, I'm just, there is, and I'll just be frank, the judges have came to us and asked us for more space, and if we're gonna have to do that, we don't have the capability to do that without probably issuing a bond, so, that's the only reason I asked, because you were gonna be here, and without making a phone call to you, I'd rather you tell me right now, and so everybody hears it, that how the best way to proceed if something happens in the future that we're, you know, put in that position, I guess.
That's one of the reasons why, I did want, and I actually mentioned it to Jason, again, obviously not an elected official, I'm not making a decision on it. Is it a good decision to do that, bad decision to do that? But obviously, there's been two proposals that have at least been put in front of the Board of Commissioners. I don't know if they were brought to council directly.
I don't
But,
think they have.
you know,
We didn't vote on anything, so it wouldn't have went to council.
well, and,
Unless
I
he
don't know if
did.
It was just like he went separately.
Yeah, I get it.
Because obviously we didn't vote on anything either, but, you know, the price tag on the, one of the options was 14.158 million, and the other one was a $12 million option. So again, just knowing that those proposals are out there, and wanting you all to be able to assess that with, you know, understanding funding mechanisms you might have if you were going to do it, and what the best option would be if you were going to do it. That's one of the reasons I wanted Jason to be here.
And something that we also talked about is, you know, I mentioned that comprehensive financial plan that we do every couple of years. We didn't know, in light of, you know, what you could possibly be thinking about in the future, if it would be helpful, especially with the new members, it would be helpful to maybe update that this year, because if you remember, your budgets were pretty tight. So I think, it would be important to know exactly kind of where you stand, not only today, but if the trend continues, what's it gonna look like a year or 2 years from now. And that might help you make some decisions of not just this capital project, but any other capital project that comes your way. And to be honest with you, not just capital projects, but some of your operating costs. I think it could help you make some tough decisions in the future if you kind of know where it looks like you're going.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and, I was gonna ask, kind of a back question on that. You know, how relevant is the, I call it the Bible with a little B that you gave us last time, how relevant is that now? Does that need to be quite a bit update on, or is it pretty well?
Well, I haven't seen what your ending balances are, so I'd be curious to see how your ending balances compare to what we had projected a year ago. But I think your assessed values have gone up quite a bit. I think that's going to impact your circuit breaker losses. So I think it's probably worth updating. Of course, you know, the more current information you have, the better decisions you can make, so.
Yeah.
And it was back in February, so it's already a year old. So I think, and just looking at it, your budgets were very tight. It looked like in the future, so I think it would serve you well to get an update to see kind of where you are at.
Similar to what you did?
Mhm.
I think that's great. I think that was a very straightforward document, easy to read. I could read it, and it was easy to understand. So,
And and for those who haven't seen it, I mean, we just go through a lot of the funds of the county, the general fund, a lot of the other operating funds, and we kind of do like go back 2 years and forward 3 or 4 years and kind of show what the trend looks like. So it helps you make some decisions.
I've got a copy
I was
of
gonna
the
say.
comprehensive if anybody
Yeah.
wants to take a look at it.
Probably about 6 weeks. It would be excellent if you could do it before the budget season, because it will completely streamline your budget process, because during this, we have to estimate all of your revenues for 2024, which is what you need to do anyway for the budget process. Then we can actually help you figure out, okay, here's the budget you need for the general fund to have a balanced budget. And try to help you bridge some of those funding gaps. So this is like the excellent time right now to start updating that, have it updated by at least May, but yeah, we can do it within about 6 weeks when you give us the go-ahead. And we will have actual circuit breakers probably around the end of March, beginning of April, because after you calculate the tax bills, you know the actual circuit breakers for 2023, so it'd be great to incorporate that into the updated plan as well.
Because I think what we've done in the past for the council is we've started kind of late summer, and then after you approved your budget or did a preliminary approval, then we kind of incorporated that into our numbers. And then it was what it was. But it'd be kind of nice, like Paige said, to have that beforehand.
Yeah, get
So
ahead
as
of
you're
it.
going into your budget, you can say, okay, can we afford this?
Yeah,
Because that's really what you need to kind of look at your revenues and then determine what your expenses are.
I think it'd be nice to get moving while we're all fairly new coming in and move forward, starting as early as possible. We meet next week, we'll talk about it again and then get you working on it.
Well, I think that, and I remember that report it's kind of scary in the future, and that's why, you know, people need to understand that revenue pools, you know, don't stay, they pretty much stay the same, but the expenses don't. So, and, you know, probably in the future, and I'm not talking for the people that do the budgets, but it's gonna be a tighter and tighter and tighter for especially our communities, so. Anybody else got any?
So the opioid money, we can go to the Attorney General's website and see what parts of it's supposed to be
Yes, I have
spent how.
I can send out a.
We have that.
PDF, that has the, abatement uses on it, approved abatement uses.
I know you got it.
Categories and different sections. And then there's, but again, I think at the top of the document, it basically says, these are the approved abatement uses, but it's not, these are not saying that there are not others, it's not an exhaustive list.
He's got a copy of it, I mean,
Okay.
that's his Bible.
He's in that.
we've spent a lot of time looking at that
I'll
document.
email, think about it.
And then there's no restrictions on the,
Unrestricted.
I mean, I know they say unrestricted, but
Still, I think it
there's
still
still
has,
some
I
restrictions.
still think that there is some, I need to go back and look at kind of the legislative history on, because again, the drafting of this statute involved negotiations between the kind of independent political subdivisions that, like Scott County, that were suing, and if you all remember the original statute that came out, or proposed statute, it looks very different than the present one, and specifically on the percentages of restricted and what those were gonna be used for. So, I'll have to get an answer.
if I remember right, it has to have something to do with it, but it's not directed to exactly,
Might not be as tightly,
yeah.
again, regulated to the purposes that are outlined in that document. But I think there's a general idea that the money is gonna be used, for those rationales.
So there's basically two ways to use it. There's restricted or unrestricted, or abatement and unrestricted.
Abatement and unrestricted is what they're
Okay, so
designated,
that's the two
yes.
general directions that you use the opioid funds for. And that, and there's X amount of dollars allocated for each one of those that we, it's on some.
And I can actually also send out the estimated payments over the 10-year period. You basically just scroll down through the Excel spreadsheet till you get to Scott County, and you'll be able to see, you know, today what Scott County has received as of 2022, and then the estimated payment for 2023, 2024. It breaks it out into the category of abatement, unrestricted. There's an attorney's fees category, and then it breaks it out year by year like that. It does it for every county, every political subdivision that received. It was part of the option, because again, there was that option to opt out, basically.
So I have a question. You said that the council can help spend or decide where the ARPA money goes. So where would be the checks and balances in that?
So the council would approve the appropriation, so, presumably, what really should happen is the commissioners and the council work together to determine what your plan is, how you're gonna spend this money. And then ultimately, the council will approve the appropriation, the permission to spend that money.
So pretty much like the way it was.
Yeah,
Nothing's really
just more
changed.
communication between commissioners and council. Hopefully.
I thought we had that.
Yeah, so,
Conversation for later.
but it's still the same where you guys have the final say, we have it.
Oh, yeah. You had the final say. We have it.
No, you have the final say on how, we have the final say on
If, yeah. So you had the final say.
The only other thing I would, bring up as you're, thinking about different projects or different projects coming in front of you throughout the year is, there was an Inflation Reduction Act law that was passed, and it does give, pretty significant credits, that the now municipalities can take advantage of if it's for capital projects that have any kind of, efficiencies. When they could be up to 58%, that can be reimbursed. So I know we're working for the, city of Austin, they're looking at doing a solar project on their utility plant. And we're working with them right now, and they're hopefully gonna get at least 50% of that project reimbursed. But I know a lot of communities are, looking at it, there's capital projects, if there's any kind of efficiency component, I definitely think we should take a look and see if we qualify, because, you could be talking a significant amount of savings.
Yeah, we did that with the.
Clean energy things, clean energy, like solar, electric powered vehicles, think those types of things.
I think, we're spending, hopefully it comes in under the 1.5, but we allocated 1.5 for a bridge that we're building that, we were told that it should clear the hurdle of, what we can use it for, so. And outside of that, in this building, I don't think we've spent too much more, $1 or $2 here and there, but.
Like I said, if you needed to do renovations to the old jail building or this building, and if some of those projects qualify, we could get half of that money reimbursed by the federal government of your project.
And that's completely separate from the ARPA stuff,
Yeah.
this is a whole nother program.
So you're saying that if we use ARPA money for a project like that, that we could get reimbursed for?
No, we're just saying that if you have a project separate from ARPA,
Okay,
that's a clean energy type of project, anything that's, again, solar, wind powered, electric vehicles, electric charging stations, can't think of some good,
When we did the
clean
roof,
fuels,
when we did the roof, and we put solar panels
There you
on the
go.
roof,
yeah.
we could have possibly been reimbursed for some of that if we had put solar
This
panels.
so is it mostly utilities? I mean, would it,
Clean,
so you're just talking
It's
about,
any sort of clean energy, so if you think of something coming up that you wanna do, and you're not using the ARPA money, this would just be something
Yeah.
coming up. We can determine if it would fit under that Inflation Reduction Act, it's IRA for short, it's new, it's fairly new. But there's some really big opportunities there, you might have to get creative as to what,
We'd have to get creative on how we're gonna pay for it. Have you seen the thing that Jason has?
Yeah. But if you need it anyway, and you could get reimbursed for 50% of it, that'd be a great deal.
Oh, yeah.
So even if we wanted like, just alternative, energy source, even if we wanted to, utilize that for another county building, right?
Right,
I mean,
exactly. Maybe kind of look at your capital plans for the upcoming future and see if we can't try to fit in with that, IRA stuff, yeah.
And that works with the bonds, if we have to bond a capital project?
Yeah, I mean, like with Austin, we're gonna have to bond for the portion that's not reimbursed by the city, but we're thinking that at least 30% is gonna be reimbursed.
Okay.
And we're bonding the rest of it. We're going through rural development there because it's to the utilities, so we're getting a really low interest rate, but before that, we were talking about going through a local bank, so yeah, so you don't have to bond for it,
Right.
but we can for the part that doesn't get reimbursed. But in that case, if we weren't getting reimbursed, the city probably couldn't have done it, it wouldn't make sense.
Would broadband fall into that category?
I don't think broadband,
Okay,
we can double check, but I don't think it does.
okay.
Now how clean energy.
Only clean energy.
Yeah, kind of that. clean
Windmills
energy.
and watermills and.
Windmills can bring windmill.
Battery cars to a certain part.
We can get some charging stations.
There are more and more law enforcement going to the electric vehicle.
Yeah, I read that, yep.
I know some that have the, can't say, anyway.
I think I'd be,
Yeah, Teslas, I'm sorry.
I think I'd be leery after this cold snap to where most of them didn't start, so.
Yeah.
Look at the Tesla ambulances, see if that can fall.
I think I'll pass on
Are we opening up to, if there are any questions?
that. We can. So, anybody got anything else for them? If not, we can open it up to where if somebody in the audience wants to have a comment or, so has anybody got, I know you do. You've never been in a room you didn't want to talk in.
Courthouse.
Jail. Anyway, has anybody got anything they want to bring up or ask a question of these two people and their expertise? Kevin, got anything? Nick, got anything? Did you ask about an ambulance?
Put that on hold until next time. I guess my only question is, what is the differentiator on the opioid money between the abatement and the unrestricted, like who is what is the designation in which would, I guess, qualify it as being directly impacted or not directly impacted, or whatever verbiage you want to use? Because, I mean,
So there's certain things that you can use the abatement portion on, and I think that's, some of those things are stipulated on the AG's website, the Attorney General's website, but there could be other things, and we'll let your attorney decide, you know, if you come up with something and say, hey, can the abatement portion of the money be used for that, then your attorney can help you decide if that, you know, you can, I think you can give an opinion.
Yes.
Yeah, Zach, you can give an
Michelle, do you have a question about your employee?
Yeah, I mean, so I had, asked the commissioners about, using employee, like a salary for some of that opioid money. Of course, with Scott County, I think we're unique in the fact that opioids played a direct part in our HIV outbreak in 2015. And so the health department changed dramatically as far as like we went from a part-time administrator to a full-time administrator, added a new position and then expanded into HIV services and prevention since then. So my question was about taking a salary out of that opioid money. Zach's, I guess, reservation is that maybe that position, if that position doesn't spend 100% of its FTE doing opioid-related activity, but it was, in my perspective, it was brought on because of everything that happened with the HIV outbreak, which can be related back to opioids, like that, we had that conversation, I guess. But then I think that goes back to what you guys were saying, that really it's up to Zach's opinion on if it fits into the abatement or the.
I think it's up to the AG.
The other thing you want to take into consideration is, you know, that money, as Zach mentioned, it doesn't go on forever.
Right.
So once that money runs out, then how are you gonna fund that salary? And do you have room for it in your existing funds? So
Can
it's
we
something else
sustain
that.
it?
Kind
Yeah.
of the same discussions we've had with the uses for the
Yeah.
ARPA,
Right.
you know, trying to fund some,
Raises.
recurring, yeah.
That kind of stuff,
Raises.
raises and being able to sustain those once the money runs out.
Yeah,
So-
we try to discourage communities
We do.
using it for that very reason, because it's not sustainable, and then, you know, what happens, you make some tough decisions,
I mean,
people get used to, bonuses or what have you.
Michelle, that, I get what you're saying, but I would have a real concern with being able to sustain it, especially since, the money that's going to be allocated in the future is not gonna be that
Right,
significant.
yeah, right, I know the first
Yeah.
year with the.
Actually, didn't you say that it was a temporary fix?
I said
Because,
just 1 year, is what I asked.
because what it was that her budget changed through the state and,
My income messes with her budget.
Yeah,
and she-
so.
go ahead,
so
explain that.
I underspend my 1159 budget, and so I kind of had a nice little nest egg. And then on top of that, where we all share the same tax ID number, some of Nick's EMS payments were going into my funds, and so even though it's income, it looks like income, I immediately put it back out to Nick at EMS. And so on our state form, it was like my revenue had increased, and I kind of had this nice little nest egg of unspent cash. They did a $150,000 increase to my 1159 budget this year, which is like a lot. My question was like, if we could for 1 year, instead of doing a big jump of $150,000, basically half that and see how we perform this year. And then if the budget still supports that next year, like go off of the full amount. But I didn't know if that would be also look at like supplementing, and like if that's allowed with the opioid fund, because I know you said it's not really allowed with ARPA. But confusing or not.
Jason, I mean, what's the conflict with Nick's money dropping into her account? I mean, is that something we can fix?
I think that's something we can look at during the budget process or even before then. I don't really understand what's happening there just because I don't have an intimate knowledge of that.
Yeah.
It seems like that money could go into, why does it have to go into 1159? I think that's what we would investigate.
Well, it's because the insurance is writing the check to health department instead of writing the check to EMS.
Because we share the
share
same
So
one.
can they just write the check to EMS, or can they write the check to the
No.
county?
Which
The
Yes,
county
that would be
government.
better.
yeah.
The county government, and then you just create a separate fund and deposit it.
Because what happens is either I get, which is very
I think
rare
it's
that
the
I
same
get
tax
hers and
number.
then I have to pay her back. Most likely what
Because it's
happens
the
is
county's
she'll
tax
get
number, I think.
$60,000 of my money
And it's
that
our,
gets
and
received into her.
I just found this out the other day, that's why it's a good thing to ask them, so.
It's not.
They need to
doesn't
fix
go
that
through
if it's
normal,
not.
We're fine on it, but when it comes to budget time, she's getting over it, I'm getting shorted, and it's just.
Yeah,
We could definitely look at that during budget time and see if there's a better way.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just been a recent occurrence, I think it's a combination of EMS billing
Yeah.
is increasing, and then it's just one payer, so like I said, it's like around 25,000, but it's enough to, like I said, I think between that and then like the next thing that we built up, state board of accounts, said, yeah, increase your budget 150,000. That just makes me nervous, it feels like a huge jump,
Right, right.
to go from a $350,000 budget to a $500,000 budget in 1 year.
Absolutely.
So then what I don't want to happen is what you guys are talking about with sustainability, so then come 2024 budget, state board of accounts says, no, you gotta go back down to, 350, like now what are we gonna do?
I think the best thing is to not deposit it into 1159, so how do we make that happen? And it might be just having them write a check to just Scott County in general and not the health department.
Okay.
I don't know, we need to look at that and
Okay.
see.
Okay. Anybody else have a question or comment, or are you ready to talk?
Well, I think, one of the things that because we got, obviously we have to be an auditor this year, but, Jason had talked about assisting during the budget process, so I don't know if everybody's questions are answered on exactly what Baker Tilly would be able to do throughout that process, or if you have any specific questions. Jennifer.
of questions. More than this meeting needs.
If you don't mind, I can give a brief kind of explanation as to what Baker Tilly can do for
That would be
you.
great.
And then you all can decide how much you want. I mean, we can help you from start to finish in the budget process. So we can help you complete all the forms that are required. We can help you estimate revenues, which really would be a part of this comprehensive financial plan. So we'd be ahead of the game if we could do this before that. We can help facilitate meetings with the commissioners, the council, the department heads, kind of explain how the budget process works. There are a number of counties and municipalities that we work at with it. We do a budget 101 class like in May, just a refresher, even for the seasoned people, as to, you know, this is what we have, like you said, limited resources, but our costs keep increasing. So the department heads know why you're saying, we can't give you that employee this year, or we can't give those. So it's like a budget 101 of, here's how all this works, here's how property taxes work, here's how the rates work, all of that. We can help at the public hearing do a presentation on your budget. So there's a lot of different things that we can do during the process. We can help you try to balance your budget, so we can say, okay, here's your target budget for each of the funds. This is where you need to be if you want a truly balanced budget. Or maybe we find ideas of, you could shift these costs over to human capital development or another fund that you might have to help bridge those funding gaps. So there's a lot that we can do for you. Some counties, we just do a review type of function. Other counties, we're start to finish through the whole process.
Start to finish.
So it really,
Start to finish.
we can do as
Yeah.
much as you want. It's
I'd be
just,
for it.
you just need to tell us.
Well, the thing about it is, I mean, I'm not on the council, but I think that, you know, when somebody has always told you that, here's the way we do it, that there may be a new way to do something.
Right, I've heard that many times, and sometimes I'll come in and say, here's kind of our methodology for the budget, and everybody's like, oh, no, we can't do that, we've never done that before. Yeah, don't be afraid of taking a fresh look at your budget. You know, a lot of places look at, okay, here's what we have to spend, now how are we gonna fund it? I think you need to look at, here's what we have to spend, now let's build a budget. And that's completely backwards from the way a lot of people have done it for many, many years. So
That's
I would say
refreshing.
keep an open mind, but that's how you build sustainable budgets though, really, truly. So, and this financial plan is really the first place to start.
And this might help you, you talked about, you know, potential capital projects. By looking at this, we can kind of see where your balances are, and, you know, depending upon the size of the project, it may be something you can't afford this year, but we can kind of say, well, maybe if we save up for 2 or 3 years, can we get there? And we can put that in the budget, or maybe we can't, and you have to do a bond issue, but at least we've looked at all the options.
Well, what you just said is very refreshing for me as a commissioner and a taxpayer, so, because I don't think we can continue to sustain what we're doing, so, and, you know.
And this is the right time to do it. We have a new commissioner, we have pretty much all new council, so this is a good time to.
And a new auditor.
Good time to, and a new auditor, so this is a good time to get in and look at things and maybe.
The
Fix it.
$1 million question, is there a way you send us the price tag on all
Yeah,
this?
we
So we can review it.
we can prepare an agreement and do an estimated cost for you. Yep.
All right, anybody else got a question about any kind, well, all right,
You put them all.
we have to. Go ahead, Phil.
They made this public, so really it's their own fault. Just two questions, really, and I think a lot of it really does fall, my questions towards Zach because of the discretional pieces, right? Because I know that you guys are gonna be, and thank you, Councilman, for saying, explain it to me like a rock, because that's how I talk to my CPA. Please dumb this down for me. So there's two strategies that came out, right? The Schedule A and the Schedule B. One is the core strategies of the abatement piece, and one is the abatement outside the box kind of piece that they talked about a little bit. And it also says on the Schedule A that a priority shall be given to the core strategies. So is that just kind of, here's some good ideas, you know, do this way, or is that kind of like what everyone in Indiana is kind of falling under, like, we're gonna try and follow the core strategies first to make sure this abatement fund is spent the way it needs to be for the communities?
I think that's certainly a me question. Usually I think the word shall and may mean very specific things, we all know that. But again, I think looking at and I'm trying to pull it up right now.
I have a copy if you want one.
So I think, yeah, I mean, I agree that those are the core strategies that it looks like from that list that they want you to pick from. You know, there's a, in E1, there's like a subsection one that talks about what the words, you know, expand and provide.
That's not
So it could be expanding an already existing program.
even if it is, maybe
But,
one time, just to
Again, I don't think
go
it
out and
gives
see what you guys are doing.
perfect guidance on
It's a no-brainer.
I think so.
how much you're supposed to dedicate to, I agree, like shall and may, you know, something very specific, but I don't know that it says percentage-wise, how you break down what goes to core strategies versus what's in the exhibit.
And I would ask that question with that, because, you know, a lot of the SAMHSA or federal grants or state grants that come down do percentages, prevention versus, law enforcement versus recovery services. And I think that's one of the things they did not put on here due to county specific is different in Scott County versus Gary, or not Gary, or Elkhart, or Scott, or Clark, or other counties, so, my second piece on that.
Just to be clear, that was one thing that we, as a county, fought for. Right, was that this wasn't gonna be a statewide, solution. This was gonna be a community-driven solution, and that's why when that initial, draft came down of the legislation, that was one of the problems, because it looked like a top-down solution versus, you know, us making decisions about what's best for us.
And then I know that, you know, the bigger lump sum that we talked about was because they combined 2021 and 2022 together to make a definite lump sum. Do you all know, and last I heard, from the state office, is that they were looking to combine, it's a 16-year payout, they're looking to move that to a 10-year payout. Is that something that has happened, Zach?
I have not informed, I've not been informed anything of the internal discussions at the Attorney General's office about whether or not they would be doing that, because I think it actually goes into a specific fund that it's paid into yearly, so if that's happening, it's happening at a much higher level than I know at this point.
Alright, and like I said, these are just overall questions. My last one would be, if you all, 'cause it sounds like you all have in the need of knowing of things that are coming down the pike as well. There's that $219 million, pharmacy lawsuit that happened, that's supposed to be coming out in 2023. I think they said that around the second middle half, which we know with the government, 2024. No offense to local government. And they're moving that one to be, with certain pharmacies, the 10-year and the 15-year payout. Do you know if those have the same unrestricted versus restricted pieces that are coming with those?
I have no idea, because honestly, this was kind of a landmark, kind of unprecedented type, settlement situation. That was ultimately, you know, how the funds were distributed and ultimately determined not only through the course of litigation, but also by a legislative fiat kind of. So I don't know how or if these funds would be treated the same, because again, I think that legislation that was previously passed for our opioid settlement was very specific as to that settlement package, so I don't know.
That's because you all had more involvement.
And again, this was, you know, Scott County was one of the first, you know, and we were litigating this issue on our own, you know, and then we were joined by other local subdivisions as well as the state.
I think some of that is the Attorney General sued the pharmacy and not the counties. It was, and so the money's going to him. How he distributes it is gonna be up to him probably. I have a question about, this opioid money. If we, and I guess maybe, the ARPA money too, but, especially the opioid, but if we give money to an organization under the assumption of what they're telling us that they're going to use that fund for, is it our responsibility, once we hand them the money, to audit that they're spending it as designated?
I think that there needs to be there definitely needs to be.
I'm asking because I'm asking either one of you, because
Yes.
because
I would treat it much like,
Like a contract. almost.
kind of a pass-through, federal grant where the county was like a pass-through entity, kind of, allowing a third party to manage the day-to-day operations of some type of service. But
But how would we do, I mean,
you do it by contract
By
with
contract.
required, reporting and auditing, probably.
and I guess where I'm going with that is that if the federal government or the state's handing us money from opioid settlement, they're gonna act, they could come back later and go, did you spend it on a baseball field someplace, or did you go gamble it out, or
Will they
whatever?
go to those third parties and ask them those questions, yes, they will.
I know what
And,
the,
oh, yeah, I was gonna say with the ARPA money, there are, additional reporting requirements in relation to sub-recipients. So I know there's a lot of taxing units that are staying away from sub-recipients, in relation to ARPA, because you will have to do, more reporting requirements
And
and.
it's,
And again, I'm not trying to dilute the discussion on ARPA, which I think is more where Baker Tilly
Yeah.
has already, you know, some knowledge from our perspective about what we received and what we might use it for. But I guess for my purpose, I would like to treat the two funds very similarly in that, you know, again, the executive comes up with a potential, you know, idea for its use, council appropriates the money or doesn't, and, you know, after that, if there was a sub-recipient of an opioid, again, it would require some additional, you know, and it would reporting and auditing from our
This-
side.
the same thing kinda happened with the $200,000 I think we received, and then that money went out to 10 or 12 or 15 people, and then we find out later that we were supposed to audit it
I think it, I
to
mean,
make sure that they spent the money correctly, and was a survey or paperwork that went with, that they should have came back and said, here's how many employees we hired, they're still employed, or what, there was a questionnaire that they were supposed to fill out.
I mean, obviously, I'm a pretty young attorney, but, you know, in my experience, the closest thing I would compare it to that I've had to deal with was the CARES Act money, where there were a lot
Well,
of,
that's actually what I'm talking
there
about,
were a
'cause
lot of sub-recipients of CARES Act money, and there were, and are ongoing audits of
Yeah.
how those sub-recipients received and used those funds. So,
yeah, I was just curious about if, like I said, if your organizations, we hand you money and you say, here's what I'm gonna do with the money, you know, we probably need to fill out or create a form, or if there's a form out there that says, did you do what you said you were gonna do?
And can I just clarify, like, so, we tend to deal with federal grants, right, so I think that's pretty standard operating procedure for us, is to report back, here's every single penny I spent.
Yeah, and
this
that's
is
what
what
I'm
I
getting
spent
at,
on. Also, the CEAS plan would not just give you, I mean, obviously, we would give you the breakdown in budget, but that also would encompass a program evaluation so that you see outcomes data. So
Yeah.
you know, what would that, like, so not just where did the funds go, but are they effective?
Yeah.
And what do we do?
I just wanna make sure as a government that if we're handing, and I'm not saying that's not the wrong word, if you're receiving funds from us to a specific program for specific reasons, and the federal government, the state is telling us, here's what you gotta do it on, we need to make sure that we're not caught behind the eight ball, it not being like it's supposed to be. So the answer, I guess, was yes, we do, we have to follow up with whatever, so.
Mike, and I think that's a great point, especially with other entities as well that service multiple places, is making sure this money stays in Scott County.
Yeah.
And so I think that would, not only give the transparency of that, but also, give that the outcomes she was stating.
Okay.
I have a question about the ARPA. So, but with the nonprofits, like several counties around us, like Jefferson and Floyd, have given money to nonprofits based on that they were able to provide loss of income or donors, from ARPA. So that's kind of like a one-time proven statement that would justify, because there are some
You're talking about like
nonprofits-
United Way or somebody like that.
Or, or even, YMCA or, Scott County Partnership or whoever, a nonprofit, if they can prove loss of income, that would, or, you know what I mean, like loss of donorship from that.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that's a sub-recipient, and I still think that there needs to be
Yeah, I'm just saying like,
reporting.
yeah, but it's like,
Yeah.
so, like, is that just like a one-time report where they showed that loss during COVID, or is that something that's ongoing? You know what I mean, like, that's, like, what they're asking for is deliverables that's gonna be continue on, whereas the United Way is saying, we lost money during this time, can we recoup some of that by asking for our.
Well, I mean, we had like 4-H come to it. There's probably only about 4 or 5 people outside of government entities that has came and said, can we have a piece of the pie? So, we were lucky in that sense, I guess, but we haven't gave any of that money out yet, cause we haven't determined, you know, where our biggest project's gonna be and what we have left, so.
And that's something.
And I'm talking about ARP or APR
And that's
or
something, if you get
ARPA.
more definite on what you want to do, but if that's a goal of yours, we can definitely look at that and put in the process in place that if it's this situation or another, that, make sure that all the documents are completed, that if you are ever audited, that you've met all the requirements, and you have and they have.
Well, that's where I'm getting at. I don't wanna be paying money back to the federal government or state or anybody else, cause he messes up, so.
Jason, you'll probably kill me for this, but is there any way that you could give us a, brief description of the information that you gave us, a year ago? So everybody here can, we're videotaping this, so everybody can hear the information we heard a year ago, where we're at now, and by year, what was it, 2025, where we would be if we didn't change things.
And we looked at, like I said, we looked at probably a dozen different funds. I'll just maybe look at your general fund.
Yeah.
Just to kind of give you an idea, because that's your biggest fund, one has the most activity. Again, this was last February, but just to kind of give you an idea. If you had brought in all the revenue that we had anticipated for 2022, and you spent 100% of your budget in 2022, you would, in your general fund, would have an ending balance of about $330,000. I don't know if you know what your ending balance was in your general fund right now, but, and then we put in your budget for 2023, adjusted, because DLGF did cut it by about $300,000, because DLGF even said that you couldn't spend what you first approved. We were showing, based upon the revenue we thought you were going to be bringing in, you'd have a negative balance of $645,000 at the end of 2023. So that kind of shows you when I said it was a very tight budget. Again, that's assuming you spend 100% of what you budgeted.
But also, in your figures, if I remember right, you want to leave money in everybody's budget.
Yeah.
Every department, you want X amount of percentage of revenue left, or revenue, but any money left in their account, so it's not ran to zero.
Right, yeah, our goal is the minimum is 15%. You have a 15% balance, and what that means is you have enough money in the bank that you can cover basically 2 months of expenses at any one time.
And we don't look at it department by department, we look at, in the general fund, at the end of a given year, you should have ending cash equal to, at minimum, 15% of the total general fund budget. So when Jason was saying at the end of 22, we had projected you'd have an ending balance of 3.5%, that's well below the floor. Really, we want you to be at 25 or 30%. And, you know, as we look at this financial plan, at least from last year, we're seeing that, we're projecting that your budgets are outspending your receipts, or at least your projected budgets are outspending your receipts. So these are not sustainable budgets, and now maybe you don't spend your whole budget, and that's something we can get into. But this is exactly what a financial plan shows. How are you, operating against your receipts? That's really what we want to look at. And how can we get those cash reserves up? Because if something happens, how are you gonna absorb an unexpected event? You know, with only 300,000, that's just not enough in your job. But hopefully you ended better, but that's.
To explain it to a rock. You look at a lot of these graphs that were provided in the comprehensive plan, okay, it kind of goes like this and then it just
Yes, it's a
now
close.
tails downward.
Thanks.
Estimated costs in 2025 being, we're at negative.
And there were some funds I remember talking that you did have, not every fund was that negative. So there were some things where you could maybe move some expenses from your general fund to public safety or something like that. So there's you do have not much flexibility, but you do have some flexibility to move things around. And that's what else this report can help you do when you get to your budget.
Well, thank you for explaining that, because, I know a lot of people misunderstands how much money the county
don't have.
has. I think there's a lot of people who think we have like federal government money.
Or school board money.
Yeah, school board money.
And I remember before, with the other folks that were here, I've been here for years and years and years, and when you came out with this, it was an eye-opening even to them, because of the things like, kind of like what you said, you could move things from one thing to the other, and auditor probably benefit most from that type of thing, and because whoever's in charge, doesn't know what the laws or rules are from what you can switch one to the other and move that. And we thought at the time that you couldn't do some of these things, and we left ourselves in a position where we were in bad shape. And you explained to us that we could move from one to the other, whatever that was, and it helped tremendously.
Knowledge is important.
Yeah, Eric, I always use an example of, because we do this for a lot of communities, these comprehensive financial plans, and most of them find them useful, because we want them to be useful. We want this to be a tool for y'all to make decisions, but I use you as an example, because I know you weren't a fan of the county hiring us to do this at first, but after thinking this was very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, he's a yes now.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear.
Yeah, it's definitely a great idea, and it helps a lot.
You're on his Christmas list. Anybody else got anything?
For these boards, I would like to see us have like scheduled joint meetings more often, maybe quarterly or something with these
So it's
things on.
kind of a planning thing, I think probably you wanna do it quarterly.
Yes.
If you wanna do
I
that.
think that's a good idea.
Good with that, I would love to see us do that, where we can move forward on not only capital projects, but know where we're at as a county and what you're thinking versus what we're thinking.
I agree with that. Also, I think, as a new government in a new year, that maybe we do that more often with department heads to where we know what they're doing and their struggles, and we can tell them our struggles as far as being able to support some of the things they're trying to do, so.
And they have a clear view of what and where their budget is throughout the year.
Yep, I
And that
agree.
they don't have to spend it all. I heard that today, they're like, well, we gotta spend this, we've got some, no. Just like at home, you put it away.
But I will, again, we're two different boards here, but I would encourage the council to find out how much their services would be, and I think that's,
The council, did you guys, or commissioners, receive like monthly reports of like, what you spent today or actual to budget? Those might be some reports that we can help you, work with your software company and get reports I think would be very beneficial. If you were ever to issue a bond in the future, that's something that rating agencies really look at to see if you're kind of proactive. When they see that you're doing a long-term financial plan, that gives you a couple extra points. When they see monthly statements, that gives you a couple extra points to the rating agency. But plus, I just think it's good information for you to have to see kind of where you're at throughout the year. cause you don't wanna be in August and you spent, 90% of your budget.
We've been
That'd be
there.
good to know. So maybe we can help you with that, that might help the council as well throughout the year.
Well, I don't wanna be like we were a couple of years ago where, I received an anonymous phone call about a situation with a department and brought it to somebody's attention and nothing happened, then we ended up, at the end of the year when we realized that, I guess, the money wasn't where it was supposed to be and we were $700,000 in the hole, so I don't wanna be in that situation ever again, and I'd love, and I know these guys are the financial people, but I would love as a commissioner to know, are you on target, are you not on target? And I know at the beginning, I know January through probably April, people are spending most of their money in those months because that's just it, and the rest of it is for supplies and stuff, but I'd love, because I asked that question, hey, I'm being told we're not gonna have money, and I was never answered, so I don't wanna ever be in that position again, so, and I know these guys don't wanna be, so, but again, if we can have those type of reports and know that, hey, we're up or down, we're on target, I mean, I think those are the things we need to do as elected officials and taxpayers, rely on us to stay and keep within the budget, so. Anybody else got anything? We'll let these guys head back to Indianapolis.
I have one quick question, sorry.
Here we go.
If we have questions for them, should we go through the auditor? Cause I know like obviously their time is very pricey, I'm sure.
You're like an attorney. Click, okay, go ahead and talk.
I mean like just if we have general questions like about our
Yes.
funds, like do we just need to forward that to the
I'd-
auditor?
I
So
would
you,
go to the.
Yeah, I would, and then she can send whatever through an email to these guys, but when would you, I mean, again, I'm talking for these guys, when would you need to know
That's my question.
what,
Yeah,
when, I'll let you finish that.
well, when would be the ideal time to start this process?
Yeah, I mean, I think you would wanna have it complete at least by May, so we've got some time here. So, I said it would probably take about 6 weeks to complete the report, so we've got some time. Maybe by March we would need to know, at least get started.
Okay.
But if you could get started sooner, that'd be great as
Okay.
well.
You'll know by then.
I mean, I'll just say just from prior experience, we do quite a few of these in Pages Right, we always try to do them right before budget.
Yeah.
So the sooner we can get started, the sooner you can get yours done rather than the pipeline starts kind of filling up, so.
Yeah.
Not to put any pressure, but just, if we can get started sooner, we can get it to you sooner.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay. You guys got anything? Anybody else got anything?
I'm gonna leave my card.
You guys got anything else you wanna ask
And
or
then here's
comment
the
on?
amortization schedules for the debt, so you know how
All
much
right,
that
well,
needs to be paid and the payment.
I'll entertain a motion for the commissioners to end our part of this meeting.
I'll make a motion.
Randy makes a motion to adjourn on the commissioner's side, or Greg?
I'll second that.
Greg seconds that, and I'll make that unanimous, so the commissioner's side of the meeting's over.
I need a motion to, the council's portion of the meeting.
I'll make a
All right, we're done.
All right, kill the owl.